Good morning, everyone. Well, wherever it is in the world, hello, and I hope your day is very pleasant. Now, it's been a while since everyone asked their questions, and I thought it was about time I actually answered them. Tim's been hassling me, but there you are. All right, so thank you for all the questions. I really appreciate it, and there are quite a few, so bear with me. First question by Jake Heater. Do you maintain your aesthetic 24/7, or have you been spotted in a white shirt and sweatpants before? I don't actually own anything that is white. No. Sweatpants, probably yes, purely because I did used to be a personal trainer, so and I was into fitness, so a lot of people probably don't know that, but and I do exercise, so I don't want to get my good blacks dirty and sweaty, so I do wear exercise clothing once in a while, but yeah, it's all black though. I don't know about keeping the aesthetic for 24/7 though, but unless black is an aesthetic overall, so yeah, maybe. Joey Vanderkrook. Hopefully I pronounced that right, Joey. How is it to meet fans, because your lyrics, artwork and interviews? I guess I wonder if there is any sort of feeling that comes when all mean strangers come to you. Let me read that again. How is it to meet fans that you know you because of your lyrics, artwork and interviews? I guess I wonder if there is any sort of feeling that comes when by all means strangers come to you and ask about if they could meet and spend some time with Ginger Moonbeam. Yeah, I wonder if people do catch that reference for Ginger Moonbeam. The older patrons, maybe. You ultimately don't know us yet. We get to know you in a way. Just wonder if you can share any thoughts on this. I guess most people come to know me initially because of music, and so from there, people that want to explore or are intrigued by what we do will kind of delve further into it. It's really good that people do that because they get to kind of understand the music more in depth, and as sort of further attachment to it. And it does mean a lot to me that people actually take something from what I write, or they sort of appreciate the lyrics. At the same time, though, I don't really necessarily see myself as a different person, or I don't necessarily see musicians as different people. We're just like everyone else. Yeah, we play instruments or do art or write or whatever. I think everyone has, generally has a unique something about them which makes them different. And but at the same time, it's nice that everything's appreciated and for what it is. So it's a good feeling. It is. In terms of people wanting to spend time with me, that's generally quite difficult because I'm not a very extrovert person, so spending time with me is not something that comes by very often for people. So yeah, I guess it depends on timing and how I am. Now, John Whitehead, what's happening with Antiqua? Well, what's happening with Antiqua? Currently, we're writing at the moment. Hopefully, a lot more before we go on tour. So we have most of an album, essentially. Well, most of an album. A lot of the bass is written already. So still working on that, and it'll be a little time. I get asked pretty much every day, so it's good that people are intrigued, but I can't talk about it too much at the moment. So we'll see. LW, I'm not entirely sure what those initials stand for, but this question has probably been asked before, but what musical instrument would you learn play if you didn't do vocals? My first choice would be cello. I just love the sounds that it makes, a lot more than violin actually, sorry Tim, but yeah, cello. And secondary would probably be piano. Ranjiv, you've probably answered this before, but do you have any tips on practicing and developing harsh vocals? My first, well, I guess for harsh vocals, it's good to have a strong basis to start with, and that would be learning to maybe sing first. Sort of it gives you kind of a better understanding of utilizing your voice, and helps with breathing and projection. And once you have that solid foundation, you can then kind of develop the screaming, or create a normal singing voice and give it more of a harsh tone and kind of develop from there. And one of the biggest tips is, as soon as it starts hurting, stop. Now, Austin Hudson. Hope you're enjoying some time off at home. My question is, are there any particular songs that you've written that mean a lot to you? Not necessarily favourite, but since you write the lyrics, are there any that stand out to you and that are maybe really proud of or enjoying performing even? P.S. My favourite are Devour Me Colossus and Forget Not, because they hit close to home. Yeah, I mean, every song that we write has some sort of personal. I have some sort of personal relationship to. I don't think you can necessarily write lyrics that don't have any sort of meaning. Otherwise, what's the point? Forget Not is certainly an important song for all of us, because of the, celebrating the lives of people we've lost, and I guess we've all lost people along the way, some more than others. Devour Me Colossus also. Also, Tapestry of the Starless Abstract is probably one of my more personal songs. I wrote that while I was in hospital. It was the first song I wrote, most of it while I was in hospital after I had a bad accident and almost died. So it's kind of where my headspace was at. It's kind of abstract. Maybe that was the drugs that I was on at the time, for the pain. Drugs for the pain, not for anything else. Of Petrichor, Weave's Black Noise, because that has a lot to do with someone that I lost many years ago. But yeah, all the songs have some sort of meaning, and they're all important to me, all on different levels and for all different reasons. I will write something about them eventually as to what everything means, but I'm time poor, and I have other obligations at the moment. Alright, Bethany, hello Bethany, all the way from South Africa. Hi Zen, after several European tours, what are your 3 favourite European countries to play? And your 3 least liked countries? Right. Obviously everyone knows I enjoy playing Romania. Also, wow. So Romania, I like Finland, so every time we play in Helsinki it's quite enjoyable. And the third one would be, I think maybe France. France has a cool vibe to it. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't really, you know, each country has their little things that their pros and cons, and so I'd probably have to think about that for a little longer. My least favorite countries, I don't necessarily think I should be answering this. Um, least like countries. Yeah, I probably won't answer that. Yeah. Although I do have to think that about that a little bit more because yeah. In terms of, well, the countries I've had, I guess, if I can answer this in a way that doesn't kind of insult the countries, my least enjoyable experiences that I've had is possibly China. You know, for different reasons, like maybe, you know, if I was sick or um, something like that. So I'd say probably China is one that I didn't really enjoy so much. I mean, one of the main factors, I guess, with China was the fact that veganism is, well, doesn't exist there. And so, you know, if you order a salad or something, um, you get a salad and it has meat on it. And or they've got oyster sauce or whatever in everything. So I mean, overall, you know, the experience for China was quite interesting, and I would go back to kind of explore a little more. However, my experience there in terms of food and things like that wasn't entirely great. Now, David Contreras, hopefully that's right. I'd personally like to know if your recent European tour has been economically profitable for Neo. I do not care about exact numbers, but simply to know that it has been worth it for you, not only in the creative and musical aspect, but also the economic. Wow, I'm doing really well today. Economic one. On the other hand, I would also like to know if you have thoughts to edit in the not too distant future a concert on DVD Blu-ray. Salute. Alright, so the last European tour was our most successful tour in Europe. I mean, it was our first headline tour, and so, you know, you play a headline show, you earn more generally than when you're a support band, so that's one positive. And I guess, you know, every time we go back to a country, we get more and more fans, and so each time it's kind of growing and growing. So it was a lot more economically successful than the previous ones, where, you know, every time you tour overseas, it is very expensive and you do lose a lot. But yeah, I mean, on a, I guess, creative level, absolutely. You know, you get to kind of express what you do musically, and, you know, all the years that you put into creating things, you get to sort of you get more and more fans and new fans that come along and sort of enjoy what you do. So it's yeah, it's certainly rewarding in that regard. And so Blu-ray DVD, we have contemplated something like this. I'm not sure how far down the track it would be, but it is something that we do want to do in the future. I'm not sure when and how, but we will get there, I'm sure. So, who wrote this question? God damn it, I'll get back to that one, because I've cut their name out. That's not really good. Val. Congratulations on the past tour. It was really amazing. Thank you for everything. A bit of a morbid question, perhaps. If you were to be buried and to design your own tombstone, what would it look like? I bet it would be quite the sight of a local cemetery. Um, yes, well, it isn't. I don't find it necessarily a morbid question because death is part of life, and we all have to experience it at some point. And so, if I was to be buried, well, initially I think I'd like to be, I guess, cremated at the end of the day. So I don't want to take up as much room as a rotting corpse, although that does perish after time. But at the same time, maybe cremation, as I did mention, being burnt alive would be something of interest. And yes, I have actually contemplated creating my own tombstones. So, um, not entirely sure what it would look like. However, it would probably be quite offensive or creepy to people. So, I have contemplated it. Um, so, um, it's a work in progress. So, um, eventually, maybe I'll start work on it. And now, Stern and Storb. Stern and Storb, I think that actually is the name of the symphonic black metal band, correct me if I'm wrong, from ages ago. With the upcoming tour continuation, will there be any songs performed off Portalvide that are not And Plague Flowers and Forget Not, or Forget Not? Quite possibly. We've been discussing set lists and whatnot, especially for the US. I'm not sure about um, uh, Europe at this stage, but certainly for the US, things are being discussed as we kind of have a longer set for that. But quite possibly, because we want to vary things up and we want to play songs that some of our fans actually haven't heard live before. So yes. Tina, oh Tina. Now this came up in an interview recently. I'm sure that you have a lot of stories from travels. Tell me the most touching one about the moment when you actually felt that what it is you do is not done in vain. The touching ones are usually the shortest. Uh, Years ago, I had a guy come up to me after a show in tears. He thanked me for the lyrics, especially to Forget Not. So she's reciting what essentially I said at some point. I explained that it helped him through the death of a family member, but also saved him from hurting himself. It was hard to comprehend that something I'd done and the band had made someone feel so much, and that was a moment that I will never forget, and something that made me feel like I'd made a positive contribution to another person's life. So my question is, do you actually like to hear those personal stories from fans? How the music, the lyrics, the band impacted their lives? Does it make you feel appreciated or help through the times when you question if a career in music is worth all the sacrifices? Or are such confessions from fans rather embarrassing and awkward? I don't necessarily think they're embarrassing and awkward for people offering information to me. It's more so that I'm generally relatively socially awkward anyway, so that probably doesn't help. But at the same time, I do appreciate when people actually divulge information to me and the band in regards to sort of how the music and everything has affected them. It takes a lot of courage for some people to actually come up to you. We're not scary people, but at the same time, people, I guess, do find that we can be intimidating just from a perspective that we're from another country and we play in a band and we're apparently up here, but in reality, we're not. We're just like everyone else. But it is kind of rewarding for people to tell us how they feel about the music, but at the same time, it's good that our music and everything's been able to help people in what they do. Well, help people in their lives and being able to function. And if we can help pull someone out from hurting themselves or help them through a tough time in their life, then it's certainly worth it. And it doesn't it doesn't, I've never really questioned as to whether or not music is uh, a worthy career path to go down, because at the end of the day I think everyone should be doing what they love, and it does get tough and whatnot. Being a musician isn't necessarily the most financially rewarding, but at the same time it's definitely rewarding in a lot of other ways which far surpass money. So yes, a lot of people do tend to come up to me and tell me about their stories and everything. They write me letters, which I keep. I keep them all, and they do pictures and paintings and that sort of thing, which a few other people want to. So there's some large paintings apparently that people want to send me. However, we've only now just got a band mailing address, so that if people do want to send things, they can. I'm sure Tim will provide that at some stage to people. But yeah, everything gets kept, and everything we get, people have gone out of their way to kind of show that they appreciate what we do, and so it is really touching. In terms of the most touching one, wow. I think one of the most touching ones was in regards to the most recent tour. I won't mention their name, but this woman wrote us a letter in regards to how one of our songs has affected her and got her through some tough times after having a very tough few years and the eventual death of a partner. And so, we were quite moved from that, and so I forget which country it was. But anyway, they'd flown from another country to this country to actually come see us play. And so we ended up dedicating that particular song to her live. So I think that was a special moment for us. Now, Eva. Hey Zen, thank you for taking the time. My question is a more ethical one. How do you handle, I like ethical questions. How do you handle when you have to buy new things? For example, shoes or jackets, do you always pick the vegan version, even if it means you buy a product that was produced using lots of resources and chemicals? Or would you purchase a non-vegan product if the production has less effects on nature / is producing less garbage? I was discussing this with a fellow vegetarian, and we both are not sure how to handle this. Okay, so this is a question that gets raised in the vegan communities a lot. I don't try to deal with the vegan community too much, because it can be irritating at times. So my first choice essentially will always be to choose something that is vegan. I'm not going to go and buy something that is an animal product, because I don't necessarily want to have to be wearing the skin or something of another creature. But obviously it does raise a question as to the more sort of we affect the environment, it then affects whatever living creature, whether it's deforestation. If I've actually said that right, it's been a very long night. I went to bed at all hours this morning, so deforestation. Thank you. So it's, you can only do so much. You can't save the world, but I guess you try to make whatever changes you can to create a bigger difference. My first choice is to buy something that is vegan. And so from there, I can then make other choices as to how to reduce the other impacts that I'm creating in life. And so, it's all about priorities, and I guess what you're comfortable with. As I said, you can't save the world, but you know, the choices you make, however small, can make a difference, and then you work your way through it. It's I guess, you know, as long as you're conscious, um, and you're trying the best you can, uh, to be able to make that difference, then I don't think you should necessarily feel bad about what you're doing. But at the same time, I'm not going to go and directly support a company that essentially sells primarily leather or wool clothing. Um, Hopefully that answered some of it, but I'm sure in person, if you want to ask those questions, I'll probably be a lot more um, thorough. Dylan O'Brien. Disregard my previous question about Nine Inch Nails attempts to counter scalpers. If you read it, I did read it. I have my own answer after experiencing it. It was awful. I'll change my question to a broader one about things a bit like scalping, piracy, unofficial merch, etc. How much do these types of people bother you? And if so, do you think it's worth taking extra measures to give them a hard time? That's a good question. I mean, scalping, I don't necessarily agree with, purely because people are essentially making money off other people, where people could have been buying them at a lower price. I mean, it does give people that missed out an opportunity to buy them, but at the same time, a lot of scalpers do buy extra tickets, so other people miss out. So I don't ultimately agree with scalping. Piracy is something we've all learned to live with. It is a catch-22 because on the downside, bands don't make the money they used to in regards to piracy, but at the same time, the music is a lot more available online, and so therefore more people hear about the music you're creating. I do wish that people that did pirate music did ultimately, if they did like it, and they find that it's, you know, a band that they'll keep listening to and that sort of thing. I hope that eventually they do, you know, back the band and support them, whether it's, you know, coming to shows or buying merch and whatnot. In terms of unofficial merch, I don't agree with that sort of thing because it's not ultimately helping the band. Unofficial merch is generally going to be available outside venues and that sort of thing after shows, I guess the bigger shows, but at the same time, buying merch from shows supports the bands, whereas the unofficial merch that people sell does not really help the band, and generally the quality of it's quite terrible from what I've seen. So it is, the whole idea of people profiting from the band does get annoying to a certain degree, but at the same time, extra measures is kind of, I don't think extra measures is overly necessary, but you know, there's only so much exposure those people can get. Yeah, I don't think we get too many. Well, you know, we're at a stage where we're not necessarily, you know, on a scalper's radar, so people are generally going to have a chance to go to our shows. So I don't think necessarily that one affects us too much. Jesse Lopez. I haven't really been keeping up with any of the other Q&As, so sorry it's been asked. So sorry if it's been asked before, but do you have any interest in explaining your lyrics of your songs? I get some rather abstract yet beautiful meanings from my own interpretations of the songs, and I've always been curious as to your personal interpretation or intent. Yeah, I mean, I've explained some of the lyrics in the past, and in interviews I've kind of gone over things briefly, and I do purposefully write in an abstract way. It's kind of how my brain works. I don't necessarily like to give direct, specific meanings to things because I don't want to spoon feed people with what they should be thinking. I'd rather, create a picture or give people some sort of visual inspiration through words. And so, every song has intent and meaning. And as I kind of said before, down the track, I'm probably going to be doing up something which explains the general understanding of each of our songs. I'm not sure how long that will be, but it will be. It will happen. But yeah, I'm glad that you get something out of them. Now, I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm not sure if I got it right last time, but Janya Aplasnik. Cats or dogs? Also, could you share with us one of the most memorable moments from your childhood? Wow, my childhood was a long time ago. Cats or dogs? I like both. I'm not sure if people would be happy with that answer, but I generally have more of a relationship with dogs. I've had more dogs than I have cats in the past, so both. I would have a dog or a cat. Unfortunately, I can't have either at the moment because I live in an apartment and people don't like them. Now, most memorable moment of my childhood. I guess one of my most memorable is, a time period. Like most of my childhood, as some people may know, I grew up in a country called Papua New Guinea, which is an island north of Australia, where I lived for a lot of my schooling. I lived there a couple of times, and a lot of my schooling there, and I learnt a lot from the experience of the years that I'd spent there. Being one of the only white kids in my class, I learnt about minorities very quickly, and it taught me to open my eyes, a lot more as to appreciating what you have. A lot of people over there live in villages, and they have nothing, yet at the same time they're some of the most happiest people in the world. So when I came back to Australia, I was quite disgusted as to what everyone took for granted, and sort of how much money meant to people and that sort of thing. So my experience in New Guinea, I would say that's given me a lot of perspective on life. And thank you for everything, Johnny, as well. John Gliss, Mr. Gliss. Hello, Mr. Darkness. What's one thing that you've been waiting for us to ask you that we haven't yet? Could you maybe ask and answer that one? I swear, if you say it's a secret. Wow. See, this is something I haven't been asked before. I'm not sure if I've been waiting for everyone to ask a question, because I'm not one for waiting for people to ask questions, because I generally don't talk a great deal or answer too many questions anyway, because my life is very private. What have I been waiting for? That is a very good question. I could say it's a secret for now. I'll go back to you on that one. I'll have a think about it. Anka. Hello, Anka. All the way from Romania. Thank you for putting up with our curiosities. My questions, because you have two, touch on two topics. One more philosophical, let's say, the other one related to art, music in particular. So firstly, if you were to have to choose between your eyesight and your hearing, what would you pick and why? And the art, music related one, which of Ihsahn's old solo albums is your favourite? Any particular song throughout time, and what do you think about Peccatum? the project he shared with his wife. Okay, so my hearing or my eyesight, which would I choose? I would say my eyesight, I think, because I've always been an artistic person, and art came first. Um, and so art gives me inspiration, and I guess has given me more of a perspective on life, and sort of it inspires me every day. Like from a child I was drawing, and so I was always fascinated with beautiful things, and it kind of I guess developed me to who I am. And sort of, over time you kind of you see things in a certain way, and the music came secondary. So as much as I love music, and how it makes me feel, and whatnot, it came second. So I guess in a nostalgic sense, I would say I'd prefer to keep my eyesight than my hearing. However, I've yet to experience the loss of one, and so perhaps that'll change when I'm old and senile. Music related one. Isan solo albums. I really enjoyed his first two. I mean, I really like his latest one, which just was released this year, so I kind of posted about that on Facebook a little while ago. But the first couple of albums, I can't even remember what they were. One was Engel, which I thought was fantastic, and the one before that, which I can't even remember. Wow. And now that we're going to go on tour with him, now that I can actually say that we are touring with this on in end of October through for a couple of weeks in November, so I'm really excited about that. However, it probably doesn't appear that way, but I am. And what do I think about Peckham? I really think Peckham is fantastic. It is quite strange as to what he's usually done, but I do really appreciate it for what it is, especially the moribund people. Now, Dina, thanks for taking the time. Have you already started to write lyrics for Antiqua and the next Neo album? If so, will there be a big difference between them regarding their themes and style? And now a completely different question. Do you make your hummus yourself sometimes, and what's your favorite kind? Alright, first question. There will be a difference between Antiqua and Neo. Antiqua will have a lot darker content. With Neo, I kind of have to vary it quite a bit, purely because we are a band of many shades and many colours, and so therefore I have to kind of accommodate to that, and especially with Tim being so bright and bubbly. But Antiqua's lyrics will be quite dark. The music will be very dark, and a lot of it quite sad as well, and so it's probably going to pull on a few more, I guess, heartstrings in that sense, probably in a different way to Neo, but it'll be a lot darker. In terms of themes, darker themes, probably a bit more, I guess, a bit more personal to some of the things I've dealt with, but we'll see as to how giving I feel. And do I make my own hummus? Sometimes I do. And my favorite kind? All sorts. I do like chili hummus. I really enjoy chili. But yeah, that's a very difficult question. Because what's life without hummus? Hmm. I'll probably get back to you on a real favorite, but chili hummus at the moment is something that I'm quite enjoying. And now Raluca. I'm really interested about the meaning behind the song Earn Part 1. Not to pick a favourite from the album, but I do seem to relate to this song in the moments of deep sadness and suicidal thoughts. By any chance, is it focused on death? Firstly, sorry to hear you've been dealing with such things, but hopefully, what we write and our music is able to kind of help you in some regard. The song itself does relate to death, yes. Overall, it's related to the actual title of the album, so Earn, and so it's, I guess the song itself is ultimately about the world burning in a way of, everyone essentially dying, but and everyone having that relationship with death, because regardless of race, religion, sex, sexuality, everything like that, death is ultimately something that brings us together in the end, and it's something that we all share. And I don't think people talk about it enough, because it is the one thing we all really share. And I think too many people are too scared to talk about something like that. Ultimately people are afraid of things they don't understand. But if you don't talk about it, you're always going to be fearful of that sort of thing. And so I think death is certainly an important subject for us to all discuss. And if you're going through sort of difficult circumstances and suicidal thoughts, then it does help that you actually do talk to someone that has sort of an understanding on this, and sooner rather than later, I think, because if you dwell on things for too long, they do kind of consume you. And I think having an open discussion with people is definitely the way to go about it. Hello. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I keep thinking I'm insulting people. I hope all is well. I've always wanted to know if you had to teach only one thing to someone and you had all the time to, what would you teach them? This is a very good question. What would I teach them? I really should have read these earlier, so I could actually come up with a decent answer. But I would teach people to be, I guess, aware and open-minded of who they are and where they are, I guess, in terms of, it's understanding who you are and your place amongst everyone else gives you perspective. And I think when you have that perspective, you can learn to be more understanding towards others, more compassionate towards others, and all other, I guess, living creatures. So, although I don't necessarily, it's something that you can teach, it's something that people have to experience and grow from. It's all well and good to kind of teach someone, to try and teach them how to be a bit more aware of the world around them. But I don't think people truly understand unless they grow through an experience like that. And so, saying it is one thing, and then experiencing it is completely something else, completely different. And so, but granted, it is something that does take to grow over time. And so, if I had all the time in the world to do that, then perhaps. But yeah, that's a good question. Ethan, when you start writing lyrics for an album, do you settle on any particular theme before writing, or does it just fall into place once you start? Generally, I will start writing as to whatever idea has been inspired by the music, or because the music it does does play a part in terms of influencing how I write, and so it provides me with a certain feeling or whatnot, and so from that feeling evolves some kind of nonsensical thought, and how my lyrics end up so abstract. But it does, it all falls into place once it's triggered by some of our music. Once in a while I might start writing lyrics, but and then it may fall into place with music that we've come up with, but generally it'll sort of start from the music. Cormac Jordan, good old Cormac. How has your vocal technique changed since you've started? Whether it was stopping a bad technique or wanting a different sound. I would say my vocal style's kind of changed quite a fair bit over the years. Initially it changed from when I first started, and I was kind of hurting myself a lot, and then I kind of went to singing lessons and learned to use my voice a bit better in that regard. And so it did change a fair bit. However, that was kind of through the start of Port Levi. So quite a few years ago. And in terms of, I guess, bad technique, years ago my voice was wearing out a lot quicker, just in terms I was pushing too hard, and so, you get into bad habits, so you need to kind of regularly check yourself. And pushing too hard is bad, and so it wears you out quicker, and when you've got to do long tours, it's probably not the best thing either. And so, yeah, my voice has probably changed a little bit more, and that's to accommodate sort of more longevity in what I do, and at the same time trialing out different sounds to accommodate sort of how our music's changed also. Now, Sander, who's your favourite Teletubby? The dead one? I'm not entirely sure. That's probably in poor taste, because I'm aware that I think one of the Teletubbies, the people from that, did pass away this year. However, if there was a black one, that would probably be my favourite. So I'm not entirely sure how to answer this. But thank you for the question, Sander. Now, Jess Wines. At the London meet and greet, we briefly discussed artists and artwork that inspires you. So I was wondering if there's any one particular piece of art that has inspired you more than any other. So my favourite piece of art is the one that is on my arm, which is by Beksinski. So it's inspired me quite a lot. From a young kid, I first saw it, and then it took me it took me years to find an actual tattoo artist that would put it on my skin, and so that was probably the one that inspires me the most. However, I'm inspired by art all the time, and new art that I see, and old artists, and well, some of the other artists that inspire me are people like Bruegel, John Martin, Bosch, Goya, all those sorts of artists kind of provide some sort of inspiration for me. There's certain pictures will have certain elements to them which kind of stand out for me. So I'll maybe go through at some point and make a list of some of my favourite art pieces. But first and foremost, Beksinski. Kevin, what is your favourite colour? Despite people saying it's not a colour, it will always be black. But secondary, I do have a thing for, I guess, red in a way, probably because it's related to blood and that sort of thing. Maybe. Interesting. And Jen J, what is your day job or what you do when you're not touring? So my day job, I don't really have a day job. I've had a lot of day jobs in the past. I've worked in a lot of places, which I probably don't want to go through all of them. Yeah, I did mention earlier that I'd worked in the past as a personal trainer. Most people don't see that though, but that's okay. So personal training I've done in the past. I've worked in offices. What else have I done? I've worked in undercover security work before. So yes, I've done a lot, but currently what I'm doing to try and survive is I do a lot of sort of artwork and photography, so that is helping me out for the time being. So art and photography, I mean, it's not a job. It's not a job that you can necessarily rely on too much, but because it is quite consistent, you might have periods where everything is going really well, and you get quite a few jobs. But at the same time, there can be times where there is nothing, and it's quite a struggle. Simona D. There would be many questions about your lyrics and concepts, but I go for this one. Is there any continuing line between Citadel and Urn? It's true that being new to Neo, I basically listened to both albums at the same time, but the references to black holes, purging of ashes, etc. are depicted in various ways in both albums, or is it just a favourite poetic theme? Thank you for your creating. Thank you, Simona. I do have common things that I do reference: black holes and burning ashes, purging of ashes. I haven't had coffee today. It's really tragic. So the albums themselves aren't necessarily related in themes. I just as you mentioned, they are some of my kind of go-to things to describe certain elements, and you know, I have fascination with things burning. I'm not really an arsonist though, but I do like flames. And black holes. I do like the idea of black holes, and you know, if you're using them in a scientific sense or whether it's more of a poetic and aesthetic sense. But yeah, I mean, they kind of paint pictures, and they're very kind of dramatic things, and I like to try and visualize very kind of intense, dramatic things, and kind of try to get that kind of thought across. And so hopefully it does, and hopefully you get something from that. But no, the albums aren't necessarily related. However, some of the themes do sort of cross over with death and whatnot. Okay, now we have Chow. Which methods and tools do you use to draft and produce your artworks, paintings, etc.? The thing I use primarily at the moment is photography and Photoshop. I'll generally go and take pictures and destroy the fuck out of them in Photoshop. I find, you know, I do draw, but I haven't sort of concentrated on that for a very long time, and I do oil painting. However, that is something I've been very slack on for many years. That's a long story, which maybe someday I'll go back to oil painting, but doing things by hand like that, it does have a personal touch, which I do want to get back to. Because you know, your art feels a lot more substantial, and you know, when you everything you create, you're creating, you know, brush strokes and lines on a page, which, you know, when you're doing something via computer, it's feels a tiny bit more impersonal, which is kind of a bit frustrating. At the same time, it is art, and you are creating it, but it does feel slightly less personal. So primarily at the moment, it's Photoshop and photography. I do now and then maybe draft a few ideas by sketching it out if I want to create a photo after some sort of theme or effect, and I'll probably kind of draw it out so that I don't lose the picture that I have in my head. But yes, eventually I do want to get back to painting and drawing properly, but if my band stops touring for a little bit, maybe I'll have a chance. Okay, now a question to go back to, and I can't find the name. I misplaced it somewhere, which is kind of frustrating, so sorry. But the question is probably, this is probably a hard question to answer, but it's kind of vague, and I'm sorry that this has been answered, if this has been answered before. No need to apologise. But is there any process you go through when writing lyrics for each song? I ask because the way you write is poetic and eloquent, while simultaneously being extremely abstract. It's something I've never seen out of any other band, and would love to know your thought process when writing lyrics. On a side note, some of my personal favourite lyrics that really exemplify this are from Tapestry of the Stars Abstract, Xenoflux, and of Petrichor Weaves Black Noise. It has been asked quite a number of times, but in many different ways. When I write, it's generally I like to kind of write or describe almost like a moving painting or something that I visualize in my head, and I want to be able to kind of explain that and kind of the story behind it, and in however abstract form, and I like to trigger people's sort of their kind of visual aspect of their brain, because I find that a lot of people don't necessarily think too much about things in that way. When you think in general, you have almost like a picture, but it's not an in-depth picture, which with intricate details and everything, it's kind of more like a blank. It's more like a canvas with a random kind of images or a standard picture, whereas mine, I like to see them as moving and kind of amalgamating into or morphing into other ones, and I like to be able to try and describe that sort of thing. And so my imagination does run quite rampant sometimes, and hence why some of the stuff does come out a little abstract. For me, they do make sense, and there's a lot of things that I implement into them. If I'm describing, some sort of religious aspect or some sort of figure or something like that, I like to kind of give people kind of a loose image of what it looks like, and then people can kind of interpret that how they like. It's like when you read a book, regardless of how a person is described in that book, everyone will have, if someone says they've got blonde hair, and it's described in a certain, wavy shoulder length or something like that, every person will have a completely different picture in their mind of what that person actually looks like. And so that's why, movie adaptations to certain things people aren't happy with, because the characters aren't the picture that they have in their head. And so, I guess I try and write in a way that's kind of a little more abstract, because I like to give a little more freedom to thought, and I'm not going to be necessarily making a movie out of the lyrics of the songs, so less chance of people being disappointed. But yeah, my thought process is ultimately just to describe what I'm trying to go through in my head, but at the same time giving people a bit of freedom of thought. So hopefully that kind of makes some sense to you. But thank you for actually reading the lyrics. I really appreciate that. Now, I did miss a question. I think it was from Mr. Gliss, who I did meet on our last tour. A lovely gentleman. The one thing you've been waiting for us to ask that you haven't been asked yet. This one stumped me. A question that I haven't been asked, so that is very good. I'm going to go for a boring question right now. So, how many brothers and sisters do I have? No, I won't do that. Although I do have an older brother and a younger sister, so there you are. So proper question. I'm going to have to get back to you on that, John. That's stumped me a little bit. So look forward to that, and maybe I'll put up a post at some point on Patreon, kind of going through that, because I've got nothing in my head at the moment. I'm on short supply of coffee, and I haven't had much sleep, so that's probably not productive for me. But I think this is all the questions. So thank you very much for everyone who put their questions forward. I really appreciate the time you took and all the support for the band. So on behalf of the band also, thank you very much for all the support. I will see you at some point in the near future. I do have to do another video for something else within the next month or so. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully I'll get to meet some more of you on tour. So until then.